if you don't get good sleep, which is the baseline, one of these building blocks to feeling well, you're going to have inflammation. There's just no way about that. You're going to have good sleep, good amount of sleep, and good quality. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. This is Dr. Ben Alilin. I am a family physician here in Orlando, Florida. I'm here to discuss things that are related to obesity and obesity-related diseases. And today on our channel, we're talking about the things that stall your weight loss and the science behind it. So many times I have patients in the office that tell me they're trying to lose weight, but they can't. And they're really not eating too much. And if you look at their food diaries, we try to see what they're eating from breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and even snacks in between. And they're not really eating too much. Now, given the scenario, if you have this patient that is, let's say, somewhere between 40, 50 years old that has a sedentary lifestyle but is obese, and it's very hard for them to lose weight even though they're trying to cut down. And one reason why is inflammation. So you're doing things right, but inflammation is there. Probably the real question is, are you really doing things right? And is there a way to reduce inflammation? And so why does this inflammation cause this problem for you to hold on to weight? And if you look at the science behind this, it happens to do with many reasons, but the first one we'll go through is that inflammation slows down the targeting of hormones. Specifically, one of these is insulin. So insulin comes out of the pancreas, floats in the bloodstream in response to a meal or carbohydrates. And when it communicates to push sugar into the cell, the receptor is disrupted when there's inflammation. And maybe one way you can have an analogy of that is if you're speaking to someone on a radio and it has a lot of static and I can't hear you, can you hear me, with this buzzing sound. You can finally, after time, get connected and find out what they're saying, but the signal is disrupted and slower. And so if you're not able to do that efficiently, what happens is the sugar builds up within the bloodstream. It converts into other particles where you can then cause elevated sugars and more, and then thus inflammation. And so the elevated sugar does that through a complicated mechanism. For those who want to geek out on that, I would say the oxidation that happens from that creates reactive oxygen species, which has more oxidative disruption with signaling and overall causes that part of the inflammation and irritation within the blood. The other part where inflammation may cause you to stunt your weight loss is leptin communication. Again, the signaling of the hormone is disrupted. Now, leptin is a hormone that reduces your appetite or gives you a feeling of satiety. And so the disruption of the signaling of that when there's inflammation, when it communicates to the brain, which says that you're not hungry, is disrupted. And then the third main point of why your metabolism may be slowed is that when you have inflammation, the more reactive oxygen species and oxidative products build up, they disrupt the mitochondria. The mitochondria uses oxidative phosphorylation to make ATP, which is the main energy source of our body. And so when we have a disrupted mitochondria, we have less ATP, thus less energy, and thus you're not metabolizing the energy pushing through, and thus you're not burning as much fat or fat storage. These are the reasons why inflammation can actually slow it down. But then how do you know what to look for if you have inflammation in your body? When you go to your doctor, the doctors usually will not order this unless they're looking for a reason for inflammation other than the typical obesity and weight loss. They're going to look for it in signs of infection, issues like autoimmune problems where your immune system is attacking itself. They may get these, but in general, these are not going to be looked at. So you could ask for that. It's a relatively cheap test to have done and add it onto your blood work, and it could be tracked. I think the issue you need to know about inflammatory markers such as CRP or ESR. Now, there are many others like interleukin 6. I think if you can do CRP, you have to understand that it's a non-specific marker. So it's not going to say that where the inflammation is coming from per se, but it will tell you if you have inflammation, and that could be a reason why you're blunting your weight loss. So if you're a patient, some lab test to get checked other than the CRP is an insulin level. If you're going to your doctor and you want to be able to assess if you are inflamed or have inflammation that's blunting your weight loss, other than CRP, another is a fasting insulin level. Again, another lab test that not all physicians, maybe endocrinologists in my experience are the ones ordering it. I order it on my blood test. Of course, high levels mean you have high levels of insulin. This then translates to why are you having high levels of insulin? Because there's something wrong with possibly the way you're eating, and you're eating too much, and thus you have high insulin levels to metabolize the food that you're intaking. It also may be the thought that you have insulin resistance, and so you need more amounts of insulin to process what you're taking. So you can check the A1C, which is a marker of the sugar level. Again, higher sugar levels, higher insulin. An A1C is a 3-month average of your sugars. And if you know that you're elevated on that, then you're going to tend to believe you might have more inflammation. Other things that might indicate if you have inflammation. If you don't get good sleep, which is the baseline, one of these building blocks to feeling well, you're going to have inflammation. There's just no way about that. You're going to have good sleep, good amount of sleep, and good quality. So with my patients, I quite often I'll look at sleep studies on them, especially if they have sugar problems, if they're obese. If you can find out if you have the right time of sleep, so 7 to 9 hours, and not just that, a better quality of sleep. So quite frequent thing that I see with patients coming to the office is that if they're obese, typically 30, 40-year-old male, then that doesn't exclude or include everybody, but on the heavier side, they're gonna tend to have sleep apnea. So your quality of sleep is gonna be disrupted. Sleep apnea is where somewhere in your nasopharyngeal passageway or in your back of your throat or by your tongue, you're blocking your airway. Usually when you're going to sleep, because when all the muscles relax, the airway collapse, and you awaken because of a suffocation, and maybe consciously or most commonly unconsciously, and there is a disruption in the sleep waves, there's a disruption of not getting into REM sleep. And so the sleep apnea should be checked because it has its many issues that happen, comorbidities that happen from it. So what do you need to do? You're trying to lose weight, you're already trying to assess if you have inflammation, and you have all these things. Well, reducing inflammation is going to be by far the most important way to do that. And so maybe you heard this already, but we're gonna have to beat this one in, is that the diet has to change. So low inflammatory foods, these are the whole foods, the berries, the fruits, vegetables. If you eat like this, these things have so many antioxidants, rich in antioxidants, that you're gonna have a reduction in inflammation. The next one is losing weight. Fat itself, especially visceral fat, is the fat behind the belly, behind the abdominal wall. It's around the viscera or around the organs. This fat is inflammatory. It tends to lack blood flow. It tends to be its own hormone creating organ that when it reacts, when it does things and it dies on itself, and it releases inflammatory chemicals. This is why it's so important to have a smaller belly size, a smaller waist size. This is why it's so important to eat to the point we do not gain visceral fat. And this is different from the fat that we have subcutaneously. This is deep below. This is why when you see these the typical male with the big pot belly, they are highly inflamed. And that is a strong risk factor. Some would say it's a time bomb for them to have that, literally a bomb sitting within their belly. And it causes the risk factor for all the vascular stuff and cancer risks. So reducing the belly size is going to be pertinent through lifestyle, diet, exercise. This lifestyle that is necessary is going to be exercising also. Now, I know by far it is the hardest thing to do. And you can get into the nuances of exercising and what type of exercising. You can get into nuances of, should I be keto or should I be vegetarian? And should I be this or that diet? But we're going to need to shrink ourselves into a normal body habitus in size. BMI, waist. We're going to need to calorie restrict. And so I've talked about this in another video. How do you calorie restrict your calorie intake and calorie outtake? That stands for KICO, but KICO is a way of losing weight by reducing your calories. And there is a method of how I teach about how to do this, and you can see this on my other video. I'll place a link of that video below. And when we talk about KICO reduction in calorie intake, we're aiming for somewhere around 500 calories less per day than what your total daily expenditures. When we're able to attain that, we'll lose about 1 pound a week. This is what is sustainable. This is what we need to aim for. Not for all the crazy nuance of the diet and saying, I need to do this, I need to do that, but we need to do reduction of calories. In America, we have too much food, too much good tasting food, too much hyper palatable food, which wants us to make us eat more. When we take those foods, they taste so good that they hijack our brain through dopamine pathways that you can't stop. And so the best part is really just avoiding those type of foods. Understanding the signals that you're transmitting with the food to your body. Understanding that's going to be a way that you can reduce your calories by 500 calories a day and therefore be sustainable in holding off the weight. It's not about you being lazy for the most part. It's not that. You know, there are hormones signaling, communicating in our body. We have to know how to utilize them. You know, GLP is a hormone that runs in our body. These are the Ozempics and the Mounjaro, these type of medications. And we use that with great success. If we believe that hormones have a strong control over us to lose weight, such as these medications, GLP medications, then we can utilize these hormones in us by guiding them through the proper diet that we intake. So hopefully this was a beneficial video for you. If you like this and content like it, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, support the channel, and getting this information out to other people. I talk a lot about obesity and obesity related conditions, and I'll see you on the next one.